There are so many different types of cruise ship cabin out there. Some of them have no window, some do have windows, some have balconies, and some even have multiple rooms inside. Regardless of the grade of cabin you're planning to book for your future cruise, one thing is critical: the location of it. In this video today, I'm going to share with you 10 cabin locations that you should absolutely try to avoid on your future cruises. If you enjoy this video today, and if you find it useful, then please support my channel by clicking both the thumbs up and the subscribe buttons. Now, before we jump in to the 10 cabin locations that you should avoid, let's first of all talk about the two options that you have when you book a cruise when it comes to selecting a cabin. Option 1 is to choose which specific cabin you'd like to book. That means that during the booking process, you'll be presented with a deck plan of the ship and you'll be able to choose the very room that you'd like to book. This means that you'll know your exact cabin number from the very second that your cruise booking is confirmed. That's option 1. But I usually tend to opt for option 2 when I book my cruises. That is that rather than pay the premium to select a specific cabin number, I actually tend to allow the cruise line to allocate my room to me closer to the time. Now, that has in the past worked in my favour, and I've had some fantastic cabins, but it's also worked to my detriment, and I've had some cabins that I absolutely would not cruise in again. Personally, it's been great for me because while I've been trying to build my knowledge of the cruise industry and also build my YouTube channel, it's been really important for me to experience good cabins and also the bad cabins that I wouldn't necessarily recommend for your future cruise. So that's option 1. Option 2. Let's get started with the first of 10 cabin locations that you really need to avoid. First, you should try to avoid booking a cruise ship cabin that isn't surrounded by other passenger cabins. Rooms that have got passenger cabins on either side and also above and below are, generally speaking, the quietest type of room that you can book on a cruise ship. The worst case scenario here is that you end up with someone that talks quite loudly next door, or maybe drags the balcony furniture across in the morning on the deck above. But these scenarios are much better than some of the others that I'm going to warn you about in this video. So number 1, make sure that when you look at the deck plan of your cabin, you have other passenger cabins to the side, front and back of your cabin, and also upstairs and downstairs. Let's move on to number 2. Second, avoid booking cruise ship cabins that are anywhere near a noisy venue. You can check the deck plan for your specific ship to find out what's around your cabin. When people think about noisy venues, they often book a cabin that doesn't have a late night bar or a nightclub above or directly beneath it. One venue that often gets overlooked, though, is the main theatre. Yes, okay, show times in the theatre are usually 2 shows each evening, and then maybe things like lectures or other events during the day. But remember that the show teams don't just perform, they also need to set up and rehearse in the theatre venue. I've been on cruise ships in the past where that setup process takes place after the final show of an evening, which means that that can run into the early hours of the morning, and if you've got a room directly upstairs, well, you're probably going to hear some of that. It's not just venues that you need to think about with this one. Also check for things like crew access doorways, because these can also be pretty noisy thoroughfares at times. You'll usually be able to see if there's an access point beside your cabin by just checking the deck plan. That brings us nicely on to point 3, which is check the deck plan for any blank spaces around your cabin. And if there is a blank space there, perhaps avoid booking that room and book one elsewhere. Now, what is a blank space on a cruise ship deck plan? Well, they can be a whole number of different things. Generally speaking, a blank space means that it will probably be an operational area. For example, you'll find blank spaces relatively close by things like the main dining rooms or the specialty restaurants, and that's because that's where the kitchens will then be. I've been on cruise ships in the past where I've been allocated cabins directly underneath blank spaces, I thought nothing of it, but it turned out to be the room service galley kitchen. That then meant that there was room service requests all day and all night, so you could always hear things rolling about upstairs, you could hear trays banging. It was a bit of a nightmare cabin. My general rule of thumb now is that if there is a blank space, I always try to avoid it. Another example of a blank space that you might find on a deck plan would be my last point from the last element that we looked at, which was crew access corridors. Some crew access corridors are really not a big deal to be beside, but if you do pull the short straw and you end up beside a particularly busy one, which I did a few years ago on board MSC World Europa, then you're going to hear that door opening and closing all night long. I ended up being beside a crew-only access door that was actually one of the main thoroughfares for the crew to go from the lower levels of the ship up to the top deck, which was where my cabin was. So they were chatting on the stairwell, they were opening the door, closing the door. You get the picture. That one really wasn't ideal. So any blank spaces that you see around your room on the deck plan, try and avoid it unless you know what it is and you're comfortable that it's not going to annoy you. Number 4, cabins next to guest laundry rooms. There are cruise ships out there that will offer passengers the ability to go and do their own laundry in a self-service laundrette style room. That room will usually have washing machines, tumble dryers, and irons and ironing boards. That means that it's perfect if you're on a longer cruise because you can go and wash everything through and you don't need to bring an extra suitcase of clothes. It's also perfect if you're on a cruise that you want to go home from with no dirty laundry in your bag. The downside, if you're staying nearby one of these laundrettes, is that, to be honest, humans will be humans, and when they're in there, they will chat. I have been in laundry rooms in the past, which can get loud when you've got 4 or 5 people waiting for a washing machine, the same amount of people waiting to transfer things over to a tumble dryer, maybe the odd person ironing a shirt for formal night that evening. There can be a lot going on in these laundry rooms. Add to that the noise of the machines themselves, and very quickly you end up with a room that you probably wouldn't want to be trying to nap through the wall from. So guest laundry, try to avoid it. Number 5, avoid booking a cabin on a cruise ship that's underneath an external deck. Now, I did use the words external deck rather than top deck because when a lot of people book their cabin, they just assume that the top deck is maybe the only space that you can go outside on when you cruise. However, that's completely wrong for 99% of cruise ships. Yes, okay, being directly underneath the top deck will result in things like sun lounger noise in the morning. You might also have swimming pool noise because there will be a plant room nearby the swimming pool, so you might hear the machines in there working during the day. But remember, you've also got things like aft-facing pools, which are usually on a lower level than the top deck. On some ships, that pool can be as low as 5 or 6 decks, if not more, below the main pool deck. So it can really catch some people off guard. Another one that's really important to consider from a noise point of view is a cabin that's directly underneath the promenade deck. The promenade deck on a cruise ship is usually where you can go to get a much clearer view of the water. It's much lower down, often where the lifeboats are, for example. But what it means is that if you're in a cabin directly underneath that deck, you're going to hear things like footsteps as people are walking around the deck, sometimes from the small hours of the morning and all through the day. Some cruise ships that I've been on, or one ocean liner in particular, was Queen Mary 2. And on that ship, people loved to go for laps of the promenade deck. I also cruised on Fred Olsen Cruise Line's Balmoral, and that is another ship that people loved to go for laps of. They actually have a rule on board Balmoral that you're not allowed to jog on the promenade deck. I imagine that is due to the noise complaints that would then come from people staying underneath. So any cabins directly underneath an external deck, try to avoid and book one elsewhere. Number 6. Try to avoid booking a cruise ship cabin that's directly beside an elevator. You might think that being nearby the elevator will be incredibly convenient for getting up and down the ship really easily. However, remember that these elevator areas of the ship do come with noise. Now, you might be thinking that the noise I'm referring to is the elevator pinging or beeping, maybe the words doors opening, doors closing, or deck 7 or deck 11 coming through the automated machine that's inside the elevator. However, that is not what frustrates me the most about cabins here. Believe it or not, what annoys me the most with having a cabin beside an elevator lobby is actually the people who are waiting for the elevator. It's, again, going back to earlier, it's human nature. If you meet someone that you know or you've seen around the ship, while you're waiting for the lift or the elevator, you're going to have a conversation with that person. Good morning. Good evening. How's your day? Did you go ashore today? What are you up to later? It's just general conversation that will happen, and that goes on a lot longer than the lift doors opening and the lift saying doors opening, for example. And if I'm in a cabin that's directly beside that lobby, well, those people's voices are going to be coming underneath my door, and I'm going to hear it and probably get quite annoyed by it. So my general rule of thumb is that if I am picking a cabin, I try to avoid an elevator lobby. My top tip on that one is to look at the deck plan, look at the 2 or the 3 elevator lobbies on the ship, and try to be right in the middle of whichever 2 you choose. That's because most people will come out of their cabin and automatically go to their closest elevator lobby, therefore meaning that the traffic going past your cabin should be at an absolute minimum if you're booking somewhere in the middle. Number 7. If you're not cruising with young children, or if you don't want to be disturbed by the noise of children, then avoid booking a cruise ship cabin close by things like kids' clubs and also family-exclusive sections on the ship. Now, obviously, there will be noise if you book a cabin near a kids' club, so let's just glance over that one. Let's focus on this family-exclusive part of the ship, because up until a cruise I took relatively recently, I never even knew that was a thing. I cruised on board Carnival Panorama from Long Beach, California, and when I was filming my ship tour for that ship, I came across a part of the ship called Family Harbour. Now, Family Harbour offers families the ability to book a stateroom in a part of the ship that's got other Family Harbour staterooms. That means that all of those rooms are incredibly family friendly, and they also come with access to a Family Harbour lounge. In there, you've got snacks, you've got drinks, you've got a lounge area with things like games consoles and various other bits of kit that allow the kids to keep themselves entertained and the parents to relax and let their hair down, I guess. If you're nearby those Family Harbour facilities and you're not travelling with kids, then you might be more likely to be disturbed by noise of, for example, teenagers or maybe young children who might be a little bit unsettled during the night. Now, it's totally fine for kids to be on cruise ships, but it's also totally fine for you to go on a cruise ship and not want to spend your holiday or your vacation being kept up at night because a child somewhere is pretty unsettled. So yes, if you want to have a totally child-free sleep at night, avoid any particularly family-friendly areas of the ship. Number 8, avoid booking a cabin that's right at the very front of your cruise ship. Due to how the motion on a ship works, you're factually going to feel it most if you're right at the front. If you're looking for the best location on board, you usually find that the cabins in the middle of the ship are the best ones to go for from a motion point of view. How you can determine midship is if you look at the outside of the ship, you've got the aft or the back section, the forward or the front section, and this section in the middle is what's referred to as midship. If you're cruising at the front of a ship, lots of these cabins do come with absolutely amazing views looking out over the front, but you do need to be really comfortable with the fact that you'll probably feel movement a bit more up here. There are so many other factors that come into play when it comes to where you feel movement, how you'll react to it. I've recently put a video together talking about how to prevent and cure seasickness when you cruise. If you're interested in checking out that video, I'll leave a link down in the comments and also down in the description of this video. Number 9. Avoid booking any adjoining cabin on the ship unless you specifically want to be in one. An adjoining cabin on a cruise ship is exactly the same as an adjoining room that you would book in a hotel on land. It means that instead of going out of your cabin door into the main corridor to then enter the room next door, you simply can open a door to take you from your room into the one beside you. Now, don't worry, those doors are always locked when you're cruising in just one cabin, but if you're cruising with friends or family, for example, then you can arrange for those adjoining doors to be unlocked so that you can free flow between the rooms without having to go out into the main corridor. The reason why I always recommend avoiding these, unless you specifically want to be in one, is the noise that can quite often travel underneath the door. It's common knowledge across the cruise industry that non-adjoining cabins are much better from a soundproofing point of view, for the simple reason that instead of it being a solid wall, there's a door, and noise will, generally speaking, travel underneath a door. If you're travelling with friends or family and you don't want to book an adjoining cabin, did you know that you can also book balcony cabins next door to each other that don't adjoin? And you can usually then remove the balcony dividing wall, meaning that you have a new way to get, or another way rather, to go from one cabin into another. It means that you don't have to go out into the main corridor. You can just go out onto your balcony, go next door, and go in there. Simple. Number 10. Avoid booking a cruise ship cabin that is directly next to, or above, or beneath a gangway. Gangways are a really interesting concept. When a ship docks, passengers will use the gangway to leave the ship and also to reboard the ship. That means that there will be activity here all during the day. Now, you might think that's okay because our ship doesn't dock until 7 o'clock in the morning and it will leave again at 6 p.m. So surely that's fine. Well, what you need to remember is that the time that's usually advertised on a cruise line itinerary is the time that they expect the ship to be docked and cleared, ready for passengers to go ashore. That means that if you've got an estimated arrival time of 8 a.m. or 7 a.m, then it's going to be earlier than that for the gangway set up, and even before they're even ready to put the gangway out onto the shore, that area will have to be fully prepped before they can even do that. So you should be expecting a little bit of noise. I recently took a cruise that had multiple overnight ports of call, and it must have been so frustrating for people who were in cabins around the gangway, because you would have 100% been able to hear people coming and going from the ship all night long. I think it would have been far too annoying for me to be directly beside the gangway. Now, that said, I have been in cabins right next to gangways in the past, and it hasn't been too troublesome, but I have heard some reviews from other ships where people have been awake first thing in the morning. They've had privacy issues because the gangway has swung right over in front of their bedroom window. There are plenty of horror stories out there. Generally speaking, if you've never cruised before and if you're not too sure, you're better to avoid it. So number 10, check where the gangways are on your ship's deck plan and avoid them. And that's it. That is 10 cabin locations that you really need to think about avoiding for your future cruise. If you enjoyed this video, which I really hope you have, then please do support my channel by clicking both the thumbs up and the subscribe buttons. Now, if you enjoyed this one and you'd like to join me in another, then why not come and join me over in this video? Here, I share with you a list of 15 things that I genuinely believe every single cruiser should do in any cruise ship cabin on day one as soon as they arrive. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you over there.